Today we are going to talk about the foreign influence on Indian culture. India is considered as a country with hoary past and having a diverse nature. But since time immemorial, India has attracted the foreigners to its own land. Right from the Vedic times, that is at least from 2000 BC, we have the Phoenicians coming in India. We have the references to the Panis in Indian context. These Panis are considered as the traders who had come to this country from the Semitic world. In fact, in Sanskrit, the word panana, meaning to trade, has come from these people, that is Panis. And even in Hindi, it has gone today. So, after this, after the Panis, we find that in around 500 BC, we have Herodotus who had come to India to search about India and report whatever was here beyond the Indus River to the king of Persia. And after that, we find that Alexander the Great had come to India along with his army, who had in fact invaded Persia and then had come to India to explore the land. There are people who came to India, from Greece, then from Persia, and then from Persia, we have people coming like Scythians and Parthians. Persia had many states, and one of them was Scythia. The Scythians were called as the Shakas in Indian context, and there were people from Parthia where they were called as Pahlavas in Indian context. But the Greeks were called as Yavanas. Many a times these were Ionian Greeks, and that is why they were called as Yavanas. There were Macedonian Greeks also. But generically, all of these Greek people were called as Yavanas by them themselves and by the Indians. So we find the existence of many such people in Indian context on Indian land and the influence of their own myths, mythology, religion and culture on Indian culture. There are places like the Buddhist caves in Western India which show this influence very directly and very clearly. There is a place called as Pitarkhora near the famous Ellora caves where we have some depictions as the guardians of the caves. In India, there is a concept called as the Yakshas. The Yakshas can be benevolent creatures if they are worshipped and pleased, or the Yakshas can be malevolent creatures if they are, irritated or if they are against you. But if you want to get benevolent nature of these Yakshas, then you have to worship them, please them, and then they would help you in guarding your own self or your own monuments. So, in case of these religious monuments of the Buddhists, we have these Yakshas as guardians. One of them is here, what you can see is at Pitarkhora, and these Yakshas, these guardians, are sometimes shown as the ears like wings. This particular motif comes from the Germanic mythology, where we have creatures like elves or pixies. In their own country, they are considered as malevolent beings, but in India, probably they were superhuman beings and that they had this superhuman power to sense the calamity in advance. And that is why we find these yakshas with the wing like ears. Here, this particular guardian is in fact wearing a snake as his ornament, ear ornament. And it is suggested that, see, this person is so powerful that he even has wild animals as his ornaments and he is able to guard your own religious monument from the evil beings. Similar motif is also seen on the facade of one of the caves at Kondane. Here again the yaksha is shown with the ear-like wings. So there are many such motifs which you find in Indian context on Indian monuments and which have no Indian origin at all but have foreign origin. Similarly, another symbol which is very important for the Europeans, even though they don't understand the meaning of it, is the triskelion. We find this triskelion on the facade of this particular cave, where we have this particular motif having three legs. This motif has come to Europe, has been seen in Europe right from 4000 BC at least, from the Neolithic times. Later on in the Greek world, we have seen this motif on various pots and pans, shields, etc. Even today, the flag of the Kingdom of Sicily has got this triskelion on it with the head of a gorgon. And we find this in India on the facade of two religious monuments, especially at Nasik and Junnar. We also have this motif shown on some of the ancient Indian coins. but nobody knows the meaning of it. Even in the European context, the scholars are still struggling to understand the meaning of this particular motif. Probably a auspicious motif, and that is why we see this at many places. This is the close up of that particular motif on the Indian monuments. Another cave at Nasik, called as cave number 10, has got a donation from a Scythian person, a Shaka. And this particular donation was in the form of the creation of the whole cave. The whole cave was a donation of a ruler who had come from Scythia all the way and who was ruling in this part of the country. But then, probably he also had the Sphinx as one of the important creatures or one of the important emblems in his own country. And that is why in the porch at the entrance of the cave, he has placed three images of Sphinx as the capital of the pillars in the veranda, in the porch itself. In their context, we have seen Egyptian Sphinx. The Egyptian Sphinx was a benevolent creature. In Greece, we see that the Sphinx has become a female and is a malevolent creature. But again, in Indian context, we find that the Sphinx is a male and is a benevolent creature and is shown guarding the caves like this, a religious monument. In fact, in the Egyptian context, the duty of a Sphinx is to guard a temple, and the same object, the same work has been given to the Sphinx in the Indian context. There is a place called as Karla, which is famous, very famous as the Buddhist prayer hall. This particular cave has got many inscriptions by the Yavanas. Yavanas are the Greek traders. So in those days, when these foreigners came to India, they came by the sea route and they also came by the land route. When they entered in Indian territory, they were accompanied by the Indian traders. In those days, people were moving around in groups. So these groups consisted of the Indian traders as well as the Buddhist monks and nuns and these foreign traders. We don't know how they used to communicate with each other because we have not found any evidence of the interpreters in ancient India. But they must have been doing these things, as we find that many intangible concepts have traveled to our land from the foreign lands, and they have landed and then they were absorbed in Indian culture, and we see them, we see their presence on the pillar capitals like these. There are evidences like these on the caves. In the caves on the pillars, we find the inscriptions which were written in the most ancient Indian script, the earliest Indian script that has been read, that has been deciphered, called as Brahmi, and which is the mother script of all Indian scripts today. The language used for these inscriptions was Prakrit, which was a local dialect, and we find these inscriptions telling us the names of the people who, in fact, you can read, had taken Indian names. This is a Greek person who has taken an Indian name called as Yasavardhana or Yashavardhana, and then he had come from a place called as Dhenukakata. So this is a place somewhere near Mumbai where there was a settlement of these Greeks, the Yavanas, and most of the people who had given donations at Karla had come from the same place. So here we find that they had also donated for the creation of the pillars, and they had made the carvers carve or show the images of Sphinx over there, as the Sphinx were considered as guardians of temples in those days. Another cave site which shows the influence of the foreigners, even though we don't see any evidence of the association in the form of inscriptions, but we have very interesting depictions in the form of a Pegasus. A Pegasus is definitely not an Indian concept, and which is definitely a Greek concept, where Pegasus is considered as the son of Poseidon. Poseidon is the sea god, as we know. So we see the depiction of a winged horse, the Pegasus, over here, along with another depiction of centaur. A centaur is also not an Indian concept, but we see the depiction of centaur over here in the form of centaur couples. And these centaur couples are shown supporting the superstructure of this particular cave, as they are shown on the capitals of pillars. So these motifs are here, even though we don't have any inscriptional evidence to say that they had foreign donations. But a very interesting evidence has come from a place called as Kolhapur, which is an important city in Maharashtra. Kolhapur has had a long tradition of living over there. Antiquity of the city goes back to around Paleolithic age. But here, right from around 1st century CE, we see constant incoming of the foreigners and the traders, where we had found in the excavations a house of a foreigner. Many things which were found in the excavations, like the pots, pans, objects like the Poseidon, were not Indian. So the excavators have concluded that this was probably a house of a Greek or Roman trader. And here a small bronze statue, a small bronze image of Poseidon was found. Nobody will worship Poseidon in India, even in those days and not even today. But a person who comes from a country where Poseidon is considered as a god would definitely worship and would like to have an image of Poseidon in his own house. These traders came from the sea route. It was a maritime trade, and that is why probably to save themselves from the calamities, from the attacks in the seas or during the sea travel, they probably worshipped this image, and that is how we have found it in the house at Kolhapur. Another interesting evidence comes from Nasik, where we have the depiction of griffins. Griffins in Scythian world are considered as the guardians of treasure. Here, even though it's a monastic site, there are no treasures inside. What we have is a religious treasure, the spiritual treasure. And that is why probably this particular motif over here is shown, is depicted on the facade of the pillar, on the pillar as the capital of this particular cave at Nasik. Here you see the beak of the bird and the animal body. Similarly, at the same site, we have an important depiction of an owl. Owl is certainly not an auspicious symbol in India. In Indian context, in Indian culture, owl has been associated with death, and that is why everybody would avoid showing an owl on his religious monument. But as this was a donation of a Scythian person, and owl was considered as the symbol of wisdom, plus owl was the vehicle of Athena, the deity of Athens, this was considered as very auspicious in the Western world. And that is how we find the depiction of owl over here on one of the beam ends of this particular cave, which was a donation of a foreigner. So in this way, there are many examples in fact. So in this way, we find that the unified culture of India, what we see today, which has a very long past and ancient history, is in fact a mixed character, is of mixed character. It has got various threads coming from all over the world. And whatever we say today is really true even for the ancient times. And that is India is an example of unity in diversity. Thank you very much.